400 stanzas. On the Middle Way. With commentary by Gyel-tsap. Chapter 15. Refuting truly existent characteristics. Assertion: products exist inherently because their characteristics such as production exist. Answer: products would exist if their characteristics existed, but these do not exist inherently. If production is asserted to produce products, then according to those who propound the non-existence of the effect, the sprout which does not exist at the time of the seed is produced after the final moment of a seed for which the necessary causes and conditions are assembled.
A sprout which does not exist during the last moment of the seed cannot be produced by way of its own entity, otherwise it follows that donkey's horns and so forth would also be produced. Thus how can anything which does not exist at the time of its cause be produced by way of its own entity? It cannot. How can anything which exists at the time of its cause be produced? It follows that it will not be produced, since anything existing at the time of its cause was produced from the outset, prior to being itself. The subject, a sprout, is not produced by way of its own entity, for neither that which exists at the time of its cause, nor that which does not exist at the time of its cause is produced by way of its own entity.
Since the sprout cannot be produced unless the seed undergoes change, the process which produces the resultant sprout destroys the causal seed. Thus something which does not exist at the time of the seed will not be produced by way of its own entity. In general, even though a sprout which is non-existent at the time of the seed is produced, it is incorrect to accept truly existent production, for then one must also accept the production of rabbit's horns. Since something which is established at the time of its cause does not need anything to establish it, that which exists at the time of its cause will not be produced. At a time when the sprout itself exists, there is no production, since it does not need to be produced. Other than that, when it does not exist, there is no production, since it cannot be produced. If it is not produced at that time nor at the other, when will there ever be production? There cannot be a time of production. Assertion: milk turning into something which is curd constitutes production.
Answer: that is incorrect. Since something which exists as milk does not need to become milk, acre is no production. Neither is that milk produced as something else, i.e. curd, for the two are different entities. There is no inherent production for the following reason too: first production, then duration, and lastly disintegration are not possible prior to production, because that which is unproduced cannot have production, duration and disintegration. Assertion: production while a thing is being produced, duration while it lasts, and disintegration when it disintegrates exist consecutively by way of their own entity. Answer: how could each at its particular time begin without the other two? Duration and disintegration are impossible without production. The same applies to the other two. Moreover, a product is not feasible without any one of these characteristics. For this reason, two products cannot be inherently produced. The thing itself, such as a clay pot, does not occur without other things, such as clay, since it depends upon clay. The clay does not exist by way of its own entity either, since it depends on pebbles. Thus the pot does not come into existence either from self or from other, for since neither self nor other exist by way of their own entity, there is no inherent production. Moreover, there is no inherent production, since it is impossible to say that production and so forth exist before, after, or simultaneously with the pot. Therefore the pot's production does not occur simultaneously with the pot by way of its own entity. If it did, since the basis and that which is based upon it would be coexistent, it would follow that the pot had been produced, for it must exist even as it is approaching production. Assertion: the pot's production exists, for without it there could be no oldness and so forth, but there is oldness characterized by cessation.
Answer: that is incorrect. The previously produced pot was not old when first produced because at that time it was new. A previously produced thing does not grow old by way of its own entity. Nor is that old which afterwards has constantly been produced, for also at that time it is new. Since afterwards it is newly produced, it will not become old by way of its own entity. Furthermore, by refuting production existent by way of its own entity, oldness existent by way of its own entity is refuted, but mere, conventional, oldness is accepted in our system too. Since there is no inherent production in any of the three times, production does not truly exist. Since cause and effect are not simultaneous, a present thing does not come into existence from its present self. Nor does it come into existence from the future, nor from the past. Moreover, since there is no inherent production in any of the three times, one must accept that production is false and like a magician's illusion.
Sutra says, monks, it is as follows: when the eye is produced, it does not come from anywhere, and when it ceases, it does not go anywhere. Thus, if there were inherent production, a thing should come from somewhere when it is produced, like the rising moon, and go somewhere when it ceases, like the setting moon. In that case it would be permanent, but since production and cessation are mere nominal imputations, one must accept that they are like magical illusions. Since things do not come from anywhere when they are produced nor go anywhere when they cease, why should external and internal existence